Hey fans, it's Amy G from your San Francisco Giants, and you're listening to Jim on Base.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base show. For today's very special guest, we have on someone who spent 13 years as an in-game reporter for NBC Sports. She's an 8-time Emmy Award-winning producer. She's been a national correspondent for the MLB network as well. She's currently with the Giants as a host and reporter. Please welcome someone I'm a big fan of, Amy Gutierrez, aka the great Amy G. Amy, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Jim, for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, excited to have you on. I was curious, you have an early off day in this current Giant season, so how do you spend it?
Well, I spend it cutting high school graduation announcements for my son. Yes, I have my little cutter right here. I'm a multitasker, and I spend it having lunch with my dad
Oh, very nice.
and working out. And tonight I'm going to hang out with the girls that I've played soccer with for 25 years. So I make the most out of my off days, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're cramming it all in.
I do. I cram it all in.
Well, I do wonder when you're getting ready for games, maybe before a workout, are you a morning person? Like, do you get coffee or what's kind of your ritual?
I'm definitely a morning person. I wish I wasn't, but I am. I'm not sure when that happened, probably when I had my first child 19 years ago. But yeah, once the eyes open in the morning, which is usually about 5 a.m. if I'm lucky. Sometimes it's 4:30, and then the mind follows and the wheels start turning. And I mean, people know me for covering the Giants in that role, but I do so many other things, and so I always have something in the hopper that I have to get done and accomplish. Whether it's I own my own social media business where I ghost write for clients and handle their accounts on social media. I have my own social media I have to monitor and manage. I teach at Sonoma State, so I'm getting my lesson plans ready. Right now I'm teaching Mondays and Wednesdays.
Mm.
And then I'm an influencer for several other companies now. I have like Campos Family Vineyards behind me, product placement, all of that. I work for McAvoy Ranch here in Petaluma. So I always have something that I'm working on or that's due. And so when the eyes open in the morning, I'm kind of done for. And I really do try and make the most out of that day. So if I'm going to be up that early, then, the other day I just got up and graded my speeches for my public speaking class.
Mm.
And so I have this hour and a half before anyone else gets up. And it's just me and my dog and my coffee.
Yeah, I was curious, what's the dog's name?
Ezzy,
Ezzy.
Ezzi. Yes, Ezzy.
And how'd
And
you come up with that name?
nobody knows. The weirdest name, but our daughter. So Ezzy is now 7. So we got her 6 years ago. And then Zachary was 12. I think he was 11 or 12. So Gracie was 7 or 8. And so a 7 or 8-year-old came up with the name, if that helps. Yeah. And we
Yeah,
went with
well, I see her popping up in some of your posts, so I was
yeah.
wondering, do we ever see any Amy G sightings at the dog park, or who's in charge of walking her?
Well, I
Mm.
am. And I don't go to the dog park because Ezzy hasn't quite figured out what she is, if she's a girl or a boy. So she's a little aggressive at times. She kind of like pees and squats, but also lifts up a leg. Like
Mm.
there's some confusion with Ezzy. And so it's much better for me to just walk her on my routes in Petaluma where I grew up instead of trying to integrate her. And I often have like a friend come over. My next door neighbor is my big time walking buddy. Our dogs get along really well. And then I have several girlfriends that I walk with and they'll bring their dog and we'll try. And if it works, then we walk the dogs together. But Ezzy is not much for a big social scene because then nobody, and then, when you're recognizable, it's, oh my God, it's Amy G's dog is this, horrible, aggressive beast. So I just tend to keep her a little more isolated.
Yeah, we don't need any Amy G posts on the Nextdoor app, no
We
complaints.
do not. Gosh, there's enough out there, right? We don't need
Yeah.
that one too. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned working out, and I've seen you post about that as well. So, are you kind of like a CrossFit person, like, or do you take classes? What's kind of your workout routine?
Yeah. I was a gym person for a long time before the pandemic, and they had started a type of class. So it was probably a hybrid of CrossFit, cardio,
Mm,
hit, kind of everything. And I got really close with the people that I worked out with because we take the same class each week, each time, same time each day.
mm,
And then the pandemic hit and everything shut down. So one of our instructors had some land here in Petaluma and they built a gym and they built a barn and they turned it into a gym. And he
mm,
kept instructing during the pandemic because we could have open doors and have fresh air. And so I just stuck with that. And then they went on to purchase the local Body Rock here in Petaluma and several others. And so it's just been kind of a nice fit that they were friends that I also started working with as an influencer. I influence for Red Barn and for Body Rock. It's a little more targeted towards Petaluma just
mm.
because you have to be here to go. But it's a really important part of my day. It's really important for my mind and my health, but more so for my mind that to just go for an hour almost every day. Either go to the barn, I go to Body Rock, or I go for a really long walk.
Mm.
And when you go with Ezzy, it's not really it's not like, you're not going slow. You're
Yeah.
you're going. And I just take that time for me and try and get this to kind of do this
Mm.
and enjoy my town and just have a few moments where, and actually some of my best like ideas for things that we're producing with the Giants or another client that I'm trying to come up with something catchy for them to do on a reel or a TikTok, they might come to me while I'm out on my walk or during my workout. And again, I have a really nice community within that setting that I really enjoy those people. So it's a pretty important part of my day.
Yeah, I feel the same way when I'm working out or running. That's kind of when I get some of my best ideas.
Mhm. It is. Yeah. It just kind of settles everything down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned your kids, so I've always been curious when you're in the spotlight, are they kind of like anti that? Do they like to stay away from it, or how does that kind of dynamic go?
Yeah. It's not a dynamic that you wish upon your children. That's for sure. And they've dealt with it. I mean, my first opening day was 2008 with the Giants facing the Dodgers in LA. And Paul and I drove down I-5 to be there with a 3-year-old and a newborn. Gracie was 5 weeks old on my first day
Wow.
covering the Giants. So, she doesn't know any differently. Neither does Zach. He was 3. But it takes a toll on them when both of their parents are in the public eye
Mm.
and in the public eye for at times a very controversial industry. So if somebody doesn't like the team that I cover, my kids hear about it. Somebody doesn't like the Raiders because Paul covers the Raiders for ESPN, my kids will hear about it. And to their credit, they have been so stellar and stoic about, that's what they do. That's not who we are. It doesn't define us what our parents do. And I think what Paul and I have tried to do is when we are there, at an event for our children, it is all about our children. And I probably even put off a vibe like, don't talk to me because
Yeah.
I'm not at my daughter's volleyball game to answer Giants questions. I'm there to root her on and cheer for her. And most people get that. And again, I would just say this, like in general, 99% of the fan base is awesome. And it's all in the approach and how you come up to somebody who's there for a family event.
Hmm.
And most of the time it's fine. But every once in a while you're like, right now?
Yeah.
Really? Or did you really just say, oh, look who's serving? It's Amy G's kid, because that's hard for my daughter.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, it's a dance that Paul and I have been doing this so long and the kids don't know any differently. And I just think the most important relationship is right here in our home and that they know that they're more important than our image or our career, our notoriety, whatever it may be. They are number one in our lives and making sure that they're okay and that they're on their path. And
Hmm.
so far, knock on wood, it's going okay. We have fantastic children.
Well, do they kind of want to follow in your footsteps, or do they have other career goals right now?
Not at all. Not at all. Our son, who's 18, getting ready to graduate from high school, is a phenomenal artist.
Mm.
and sports are not his jam. They never have been. Watching them or playing them, it just doesn't interest Zachary. And I think that was kind of much harder for Paul than for me. And I don't know if that's a father son, mother son type of situation, that we have different relationships with him. But what I take from that is that Zachary has taught me and Paul so much more and broadened, what our interests are. We didn't know anything about art in this world, and he's just so talented, and we don't know how. And we're just like, all right, look at you, take this to the bank, kid. And so, yeah, I don't know, maybe at some point there will be some type of integration into sports, or maybe those worlds will collide for Zachary, because he certainly knows more than he lets on. I mean, these kids grew up with games on in the background their whole life. So it's funny, like, Zach will be like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. And we're like, oh, what? You know that? Like, so he surprises us every once in a while, but really it's just not what interests him. And but Gracie is a very good athlete. She's a very good volleyball player, and she's kind of focused on that sport. And she definitely follows and watches. Like, she'll ask. If she came home yesterday, she was working a volleyball camp, and she was like, "Did the Giants win?" Unfortunately, I had to tell her, "No, they did not. No, they didn't even come close." So she has some interest and is actually talking about potentially pursuing collegiate volleyball. But I think career-wise and being in the spotlight doesn't interest either one of our kids. They're very introverted with that. Like, they like to fly under the radar. They're not like, they don't want to do TikToks with me. They're like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's a nice way to be, to not have to rely on being in the public eye if you can help it. I mean, I've certainly made a living off of it, and I'm appreciative for it, but there are times where it's, not ideal.
Yeah. Well, what kind of artist is your son? Is he drawing, or what
Yeah,
is it?
he's going to kill me because if I get this wrong. He's very into sketching. So he uses like charcoal, pencil, and he likes concept art. So one of his favorite shows, he's really into Marvel and into like Lucas and all of the Star Wars shows. He watches all of them with Paul. I watch a handful and ask a lot of questions, and I never know the characters' names.
Yeah.
I never know what planet they're on. Like, I'm like, what planet is that? And he's like, Mom, when are you going to learn? It's, Coruscant or whatever it is. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, I get him confused. There's a lot of lights. So, but in The Mandalorian, anybody who's familiar with that show, at the end of each show, they show the storyboarding that they had done prior to the episode. And that seems to be where his heart is, in creating. You write the story, you write about the creature or whatever it is, and he would create it. So, and he's gotten into a couple schools for that program. So
Wow.
we'll see where he ends up in the fall, but because he hasn't decided, but that, he talks about working for a Lucas, a Pixar, a Disney, something like that. So we'll see. He's
Yeah.
young. Yeah.
That's funny. I'm getting flashbacks because I used to do that when I was in like second and third grade. I would draw the characters, make
Yeah.
up stories about how I thought it should end, so that's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. It's a fantastic skill, and it's a joy to watch him work. And he actually, quick side note and plug, I guess, I have a new children's book coming out in spring of 2024, and Zachary drew the team name on the jersey. So he's going to have his first true publication coming up in the spring.
So is he going to get some royalties, or how's that work?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kick those down for college tuition, kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about the books too later on. I got a plug for that. And your husband, Paul, you mentioned he works for ESPN, covers the Raiders. I remember you've posted a picture of you guys, I think at the Giants game in like the bleacher area. So
Okay.
I was curious how you guys met.
Well, we met in New York, actually. So my friend Kim's going to love this because she got a plug. I did a podcast with Jeremy. Was it Jeremy Affel? I think I did. I forget who I did the podcast with, but I told our story, and Kim always says, I want credit for introducing you and Paul. Well, Kimmy is my childhood friend. We became really good friends in high school, but we've known each other our whole life. She's from Petaluma. we both went to Davis together. And then she went to New York to work for Sports Illustrated. And so I was a year behind her. So after I graduated, I moved to LA. I was working in television, and I went on a trip to New York to go see Kimmy. And we were spending some time at her little teeny tiny brownstone and looking through photo albums, and I'm completely dating myself, but that's what we had. And she had recently returned from the 96 Olympics in Atlanta with her crew that she worked with at Sports Illustrated. There's a whole group picture, and there's Paul right in front, like dropping some, sign, whatever, like he's from Southern California. And I go, who's that? He's cute. I don't know what he's doing, but he's cute. And she says, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I have our picture, me and Kim, in my office, and he asked who you were. And so I kind of had the upper hand because I knew he'd asked about me, but he didn't know I'd asked about him. So anyway, I went into the office with her, and that is how I met Paul.
What was your guys' first date? Do you remember?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we went out that night.
Oh, okay.
I met him. I mean, I don't know if that's technically our first date, but we went out that night for sure in New York. But then I went home. I was living in LA. And there was some things that needed working out on probably both of our ends. And so I actually didn't see him again for another year.
Oh, wow.
And he was coming out. I was still living in LA, and he was coming out to cover a Dodgers game, and he got me a ticket to meet him there at Will Call. And what he didn't tell me was that he wasn't going to be able to meet me, that his friend BJ will get a shout out on this too. He still works in sports. And I had met BJ previous with Kim. He worked with them, but it was this one night that I met him. And he goes, BJ is going to be there. He's going to meet you, and then I'll come find you guys because I got to go to the clubhouse. And this is way before I was in sports, so I didn't know what his job was or what he was doing. Now I know exactly where he was. And I see BJ finally, and I'm like, I think that's him. I mean, it's been a minute, right? And I go, well, gosh, he sure has a lot of people with him that look a lot like Paul. And sure enough, there's BJ with Paul's mom, Paul's dad, Paul's brother, Paul's cousins. The whole crew came to the game, and I hadn't talked about, I was talking to Paul again, but I hadn't seen him in a year. And here I am walking in my seats with his mom and dad. They're like, who's this? So it was an interesting reunion. And I guess probably a few weeks after that is when we officially started dating. If I have my times right, he came out in May and we started dating in June after he fessed up to kind of who this girl was and why she came to the game and all that stuff. So it was, we figured it out, and we've been together for 25 years. So
wow. So you got a good streak going.
I think so. I think we had a good streak going.
Yeah. Well, I was curious because he covers football now and you do baseball. So how does that work? Your off seasons are kind of opposite, right? So
yeah, I mean, it actually works out great in general because one of us is usually, especially when the kids were younger, and he covered baseball for a while too. I mean, we were both at what was then Comcast Sportsnet before it turned into NBC Sports Bay Area, and I was on the Giants and he was covering the A's. So he's kind of covered everything. When we were first married, he was covering college hoops. He was covering USC basketball, and he was the backup writer for the Dodgers for the LA Times. But then he went on a long run covering the Raiders. And so that's kind of been, he had a little brief hiatus covering the A's in between that before he went to ESPN. But since he's been with ESPN, it's been the Raiders. And so, it's kind of, it's a bummer now that they're in Vegas. I mean, that's, the fly in the ointment is that the team moved. But when he was here, he would start camp in July, and it'd be 3 weeks where he'd have a fairly regular day, like a 9 to 5-er in Napa, be able to come back. And so that would get us to August, and then August and September, and for several seasons, October. we kind of, got my parents involved, friends involved, whatever we needed to do. But I didn't travel with the team during the season. So I'd have long stretches too where, if they went on a 10-game road trip, I was home.
Gotcha.
So we just, we moved to where family was. So my parents are, I could like a stone's throw away. They're right over there. And that's been huge. And this is where I grew up. And that was really important to have a community that, you could call in a friend, and we all kind of have kids the same age. And so when we needed help, we always had it. I think the hard part is Paul and I don't get to see a lot of each other,
Yeah.
so he's home and I'm going to a game, or he's going to a game and I'm home. And now that he's in Vegas, that's just become more magnified, but we get it too. That is the nice part about being with someone who's in the industry. And I know what it takes for him to have to do and execute his job well. And so you just kind of figure it out. And I think the big thing for me regarding Paul is, especially now that he's in Vegas, when he comes home, he's like, well, I'm taking over. What do we need to get done? I got it. I got it. I got it. And it's like a list. And so he comes home and he's like crazy helpful, where sometimes I'm like, do you need to just rest, or do you want to just maybe not fly home on a Monday night so that you have to fly right back on a Wednesday and just sleep? I get it. And the kids are so much older now. They don't need us nearly as much as they did, but he's just beyond aware of the time that he's gone. And so that is kind of really nice to have, that he doesn't take advantage of it at all.
Well, it sounds like you guys got to make the time count, and maybe you plan some fun trips during the off season where you can squeeze them in.
Well, we actually planned a trip. We're going to Italy
Oh,
in June.
nice.
That's our big, and the team's on the road, and it's before he has to go back. So that is exactly what we try and do. I mean, this one's a big one, but we do. We went to Hawaii for our anniversary, our 20th anniversary. You got to make time for each other. You still have to date each other when you're
Yeah.
married. I've always thought that. Yeah.
Well, what other hobbies do you have? I got to interview Jock Peterson the other day, so I was excited for that. And I asked
I
him,
bet.
yeah, I said, what kind of music are you listening to? And I was expecting a total different answer, but he said he's been into Taylor Swift lately. So
Oh,
yeah, I was curious
okay.
who you're into. I almost said, are you a Swiftie? But I was like, I don't need him storming out of the interview this early.
Yeah, right. Not that soon.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I mean, I do. I listen to a lot of music that my daughter listens to,
Mm,
because she kind of controls the car radio. But if I have my druthers, I'm really into like 70s,
mm.
like pretty soft rock, like disco. I love the Bee Gees. Paul took me to a Bee Gees review not too long ago in Vegas for my birthday. It was last November. I love Chicago. I'm a huge Journey fan. Like Steve Perry is a huge Giants fan, and I almost fainted when I met him. That is like, I will fangirl out on a musician that I love.
Mm,
But I love the modern stuff is super fun. Like Billie Eilish. I do like Taylor Swift. I feel bad. I think she gets a bad rap a lot, where I'm like, I think her stuff's pretty good. I love Gwen Stefani, Kelly Clarkson. I'm not picky. I'm
hmm.
I'm not a huge country fan. I'm more like old school country, like Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, like Ronnie Millsap, like kind of stuff I grew up on.
Yeah. Real
But
country?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know a lot of the current country artists, and I'm not that wouldn't be the genre I would go to. But I also love you know, I love like Snoop and Dre. I was like super excited about the Super Bowl that they all performed. I love Eminem. Like if I need to get my energy up, I'll just pop in some Slim Shady or whatever, because I'm like, all right, I need the couple swear words and let's go. Like you
Yeah.
gotta, yeah, motivate. So I mean, if you saw my phone, like you'd see like Barry Manilow and you, so I range, and I get a lot of songs that on my phone from the Clubhouse, where I'm like,
Mm,
I haven't heard this, who's this?
yeah.
Or yeah, so but I kind of like everything. So it's
Yeah.
not a good answer, but it's true.
I like a little bit of everything, mostly rock and roll, but I got to be careful when I put my every time I put my iPhone on shuffle, Katy Perry comes on or CC Peniston. It's like this is embarrassing. So I got to be
So
careful.
we call her Carrie Patey in our household because Grace reversed her name all when she was a little girl. So like
Uh,
all of that genre, Grace was really little and she loved all of those songs, which called her Carrie Patey. So that's what we call her in
that's
our house.
funny.
Yeah.
Who was your first concert then? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh. I am not much of a concert goer in general. I feel like I might have gone to AC/DC
Mm, that's
in
a good one.
high school and then like didn't go for like 15 years to a concert. Yeah. I took Lady Gaga. I took Gracie to see Lady Gaga at Oracle Park. And oh, I'm forgetting his name now. Ed Sheeran. I
Mm,
went to see Ed Sheeran. Like I would go more now because I would have money to pay for really nice seats instead
yeah.
of like going in with the masses. I That's not my jam. I don't really like crowded like situations where beer's flying all over
Yeah.
me. I was never a big concert person.
Okay. No, it makes sense. And you had mentioned earlier about playing soccer tonight, right? So I
Well,
know.
I'm having dinner with my soccer friends. I'm not playing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, but I have played soccer for like 40
Oh,
plus years.
okay.
Yeah,
Well, I think I saw too, like you played volleyball, softball, basketball as well. So which one out of those is your favorite then, would you say?
volleyball was my
Okay.
favorite. Yeah, so it's fun to watch Gracie play now, and I kind of have to control myself. I'm like trying to dive to get the ball myself. But no, volleyball, I mean, when I was little, it was a different time for girls in sports. Certainly we had more opportunities than my mom did. But, I was born in 1973. That was right after Title IX was passed in 72. And so we were able to have some opportunities that girls prior to us didn't have. But in my town, you played soccer and softball. If you were,
Mm,
that's what was offered through the city. And so I started soccer. Maybe I think I might have been 6 when I started soccer and softball. And you still, you very much had a season. So
mm,
you didn't play travel ball. I mean, there was just maybe a handful of kids that played travel ball in my town. And so it's really nice to see. I didn't touch at basketball until I was, the summer before my freshman year in high school. And I didn't touch a volleyball until 7th grade.
mm.
And we didn't have a team in 8th grade. We had budget cuts. So, you just found a way to make it work. And I was really athletic, which was great. My dad's side was super athletic. He got a scholarship to Stanford to pitch, and my brother was a good athlete. And
Mm.
having an older brother helped me because he did work with me, especially on basketball. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, and I got brought up to varsity as a freshman on all the teams. And basketball, we just all started laughing because we're like, what? Am I on varsity? But you didn't have a lot of girls playing, right? Because none of us had played growing up. So my coach told me, he's like, well, I picked you up because you're the first one to that end of the court and the first one to that end of the court. And I'm like, I can do that. Like I will hustle for you. And that is kind of what I believe is my foundation. And anything I do, I'm going to give it my all, even if I'm not sure what I'm doing. Right. And I always try and pass that on to people getting into careers and stuff like that. You're not always going to know what you're doing, but can
Yeah.
you figure it out? Are you resourceful? Are you smart? When you make a mistake, do you learn from that and not make the same mistake? And it's all applied through my run with sports,
Yeah.
and I mean, probably my best sport was softball because I played it the longest, but I had to give up soccer because it was the same season as volleyball. And I didn't really
Mm,
know what I was doing in volleyball, but I'll dive for that. And okay, I'm going to watch you do it. And I'm going to try and mimic what you're doing. So I'm a quick study.
mm.
And I think that helped me tremendously in my career going forward. And I ended up playing, at Davis, and um, it's a fabulous sport. It's a fabulous sport. I could watch it all day.
Well, it makes me wonder too, when you're younger and now you get to interview players, did you ever meet anybody that you admired and then maybe later on get to interview them, kind of have like a full circle
Oh,
moment?
sure. Oh, sure. I mean, Will Clark, it comes to mind first.
Ah,
I just loved him growing up, and Dave Stewart with the A's. So they were probably my two favorite players. And I will not change my mind on this. I grew up an A's and a Giants fan. So everybody's like, you have to choose. And I'm
yeah.
like, actually, I don't, because I don't want to, and I don't have to. And I loved both teams, and we would win tickets to the games in elementary school for our grades. And honestly, like, you were more excited to go to an A's game because the Giants played at Candlestick and you knew you were going to freeze.
Yeah.
And, I had to have my chocolate carnation malt with the wooden stick with the splinters. And my dad was like, you're not going to finish it. I'm like, no, this time, Dad, I'm going to do it. And I got like 3 bites. I'm like, it's so cold. It's so cold, Daddy. It's so cold. Oh, give me the poor guy had to eat all of our ice cream. So, but yeah, no. So when I first met Will Clark, again, like, not many athletes I'm not starstruck by many athletes just because I can't be,
Mhm.
you gotta do your job.
Yeah.
But when it was Will Clark, I was like, oh my God, I loved you growing up. And Dave Stewart was the same thing. I mean, I think I channeled Dave Stewart's stare for any sport I played, and I was like, he has the best stare down ever. And then we ended up working together. I worked
Mhm.
with both of them. And I would say I know Will much more than Dave just because I cover the Giants. And I mean, Will is like, to me, legitimately a friend. And Dave is like a very, very, like, if I needed something, I could text Dave, or if
Mhm.
he's just such a wonderful man. And it's such a pleasure to find out that somebody that you really admired is a really nice person,
Yeah.
because the opposite has happened
Mhm.
too. Um, I feel so fortunate to have met both of them growing up, admiring them as athletes in the Bay Area.
Well, that's great. And I like having comedians on too because I like to ask them, like, do you remember your first open mic? How did you feel? How did it go? So it makes me kind of wonder with you, do you remember what you consider to maybe be your first big interview, or who it was, how you felt? How did it go?
Yeah, no, I mean, the first one that really had, impact in my career was Jonathan Sanchez for his
Hmm.
no-hitter in 2009. And it's not for what most people think. And it kind of sounds negative, but it really isn't anymore. It's like something I look back on, and I'm proud of myself for how I handled it, because so he throws the no-hitter. Anybody that's a Giants fan listening to this is going to know the background, but quickly, I think Randy Johnson was set to pitch, and Jonathan had been demoted to the bullpen, and Randy was hurt and couldn't go. So Jonathan got the call, and he was on the trading block. Like, they were
Hmm.
very likely going to get rid of him. And he goes on to have this, just fabulous night on the mound and the best stuff he's ever had. And there's his dad in the stands who had never seen him play a professional baseball game and was able to come in from Puerto Rico to watch Jonathan play. And so here's my world. Here's where I'm like, oh, this is a great story, right? And this humanizes these guys so much, where people had counted him out. They didn't want him to start. The Giants were close to giving up on him, and he used all of it to fuel himself that night and show them what he still had. And so I got this interview, and oh my gosh, I just witnessed a no-hitter, and now I'm going to interview the guy that authored the no-hitter. This is amazing. And he's going down the line, right? And so Krug and Kuiper are filling until Jonathan comes to me for this post-game interview. So the camera's not on me at all that I know of, which didn't matter. I didn't care. But in my head, I'm like, I'm not on the broadcast right now. Krug and Kuiper are talking, they're filling. He goes down. I mean, it's like all the coaches, the 24 other players at that time, the PR staff, and it's hug, 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 hug. He's hugging everyone. And so here I am at the end of the line. And at this point, I've had 2 seasons covering Jonathan, and I know him well enough to, be happy for him. And he comes in to give me a hug. And I'm like, okay, well, good job, honey. Like, the mom in me is very happy for him. Plus, the story has blown my mind. Like, I know his dad's coming down to surprise him. Like, we've got all the tricks
Hmm.
in play. And so they tossed to me, and I interviewed Jonathan, and we bring in his dad, and they hug, and we still have, there's video of it online where the hug is amazing. And I'm so excited for this moment, and that I got to be a part of it and to be a very small part of how this played out. And so done, my adrenaline kind of coming down, and I call Paul, and I feel like I had a flip phone, and I'll never forget. Paul says, "Oh, babe, you got caught." And I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "They caught you on camera hugging Jonathan." And I'm like, "So?" He goes, "No, this is bad. This is bad." And Paul definitely had the knowledge of the sports industry to say that. But as his wife, then I went into, "You're just jealous because you've never covered a no-hitter." Like, I got really defensive because I didn't know what in the world I had done that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this was on a Friday night. 2 days later, Monday morning, here comes Sports Talk Radio. And I got lit up for a week. I got lit up by almost every show on a station that doesn't need to be named, but we all know what it is, right? And I mean, I got lit up hour after hour after hour, how unprofessional I was. You believe she did that? That's, just not okay. And I was just like, you aren't there. If Mike Krukow had been in my spot, if Dwayne had been in my spot, the same thing would have happened. And I want to know what the takeaway would have been. And what I'll say, and why it's not a negative thing in my life anymore, that time period was really, really hard, because these were my colleagues that were doing this to me. Mm-hmm. And I just said, I wouldn't change it. I don't care. I am comfortable in who I am as a reporter. Take gender out of it. Why does gender have any effect at all? Because he hugged 20, 30 other people all the way down to me that were all men. But because that's what it was. Because I'm a woman, that was wrong. That was unprofessional. And I call bullshit. No, it was human. It's what humans do when they're happy for each other. And I think we've seen, not that my situation caused this by any means, but I do think it is part of looking at change and looking at the role women play in these organizations, in a clubhouse. And if you want to be treated equally, then act equal. And I did. And that's because I acted like myself. Mm-hmm. So that's something I still say to this day, because we're 14 years post that moment, which is crazy. But if you're not yourself, then get out of there. Like, if you can't be genuine, and that's who I genuinely was. And Jonathan and I are still friends today. It's fun. Like, we'll text each other every once in a while. And I interviewed him during the pandemic to go over that game, and it's definitely a thing in the past. But I think you see women have a much more accepted role in men's professional sports today, especially physically, like a picture with them, you can give them a hug. Like, this is more what our society is like, and you don't have to read things into it.
Well, it's kind of weird too, because what are you supposed to do? Like, stiff arm them in that moment? Then you'll get ridiculed for that,
100%, Jim. I'm like, going in.
Yeah.
Let's do it, And I just, honestly, I think that the thing I take away most is, like, I don't think that way. I didn't think that way at that moment. I wasn't worried about it being on camera. I wasn't thinking it was unprofessional. I was thinking it's the natural thing to do. And if you can do that and kind of stick to your morals and your character, who you are deep down, I think you're going to be okay in any industry. But you got to, I will never apologize for it. I didn't apologize for it then. I was furious as to the backlash I received, because I knew it was gender related, but I also just put my chin up and kept going. And I'm still here.
That's
A lot
quite
of
the
those guys aren't.
yeah.
Ripped me.
That is crazy, but it's that's a quite the kind of first open mic moment then,
I know, right? You guys weren't expecting that.
Yeah. Well, I was also at the game. Giants were in the playoffs when Tom Cruise was randomly in the crowd. So I was
Oh,
curious. Yeah, who
so
yeah, you've interviewed some big people. Do you have kind of ready to go questions that are general that you can apply to those spur of the moment moments or?
I don't walk around with a fixed set by
Hmm.
any means. I think kind of the obvious one. So we've got the home opener coming up and there'll be some celebrities there that I'm supposed to talk
Mm,
to. But like an obvious one is just your connection to the Giants,
mm.
what brings you to the game?
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing would be what would pop into my head if I'm watching from home. Why are they there? That's
Hmm.
cool. Why are they at this game? Does he live in LA? So I just kind of, what I think I do is I try to put myself in a fan's shoes as to, if you're watching this at home, what are your questions going to be, either about the game or for this player? And now
Hmm.
we've gotten into such a, uh, you know, kind of softball question world with social media that I'm really kind of having fun with the like, would you rathers or, your favorites, or it's really more now about these little things that you're really trying to get to know the
Mm.
person. And so I've had to make some adjustments in my journalistic style to lighten it up. For so many years it was like you got to come up with like the right thing to ask them about this game.
Yeah.
And now it's more like, no, you can have a little more fun and it's a little looser out there. But yeah, no, Tom, I remember what I do know is he didn't look
Yeah.
normal.
It was like a viral thing after that.
Yep. Well, and I don't know if you did. It went viral. It looked like he had like surgery on his teeth or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. And then I was like, man, I'm 5'10" and I had heels on. So I'm probably 6 feet going down there. And I was like, this is going to be awkward. And it was. He is not tall. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, you talk about, lasting, being around for a while. The players always come and go. The broadcasters, the media is there for usually longer periods of time. We just saw it with Sergio Romo the other day, his final game. So I know you kind of become family and friends through the years. Who's somebody that maybe you were so used to seeing every day, you were close to, and maybe you miss because they're not around much anymore?
Oh man. I mean, that's almost
Too hard.
too to count, right? Just because of
Yeah.
how, Boch comes to mind.
Mm.
Boch is probably the first one that comes to mind. Because broadcast wise, Dwayne and Mike are still there. So I do get to see them when I go into the park. But we've had some, infiltration of some other
Hmm.
broadcasters now, but they're guys I know, it's Hunter and Sean Estes and Hobby. But I miss Boch, I miss
Mm.
Flan, Gardy, Rigetti. Like they were a really cool group of coaches, and that's not to take anything away from the current coaches. I want to make that really clear because
Hmm.
change has to happen, and the current coaching staff they're all super friendly and
Yeah.
accommodating, but I just haven't had the time with them. I had 13 seasons with this other crew,
Hmm.
and they definitely became people that were part of my everyday. And I can reach out to Boch whenever. He always writes me back or responds, or we joke about something. And there's a pair of dogs here in Petaluma named Bochi and Amy, so I'll send them a picture when I see them. But it was a kind of a surreal run.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of players from that time that I really enjoyed when they were on the team. And but even like currently, with Belt and
Mm.
Longoria, I wrote them and I just thank them for the times that they gave me their time and their patience and their humor. But it's part of the game too.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. And I will say that this new regime with Gabe is, very accommodating, very helpful. I love Alyssa Natkin. I was able to fortunate enough to be the first person to interview her,
Mm.
which is quite an honor. And I did a show last season called Coach's Corner. So I got to know several of the coaches, and they're really, really cool people. And I think that relationship could be very similar to what I had with the previous coaching staff. It's just a matter of getting the time.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I had Lissa Nacken on, Antoine Richardson, Hallberg, Kapler, and it just
Yeah.
it blew me away just how open they are, and it's fun to talk to them. To me, like about non-baseball stuff. I think they have such interesting backstories.
And I think that is, something, if you go back to the Bochy era, Bochy was quite a Renaissance man, but not a lot of people knew that because you didn't get into much else with Boch except baseball. But because I had this relationship with him, I knew he loved wine, and I knew he loved whiskey and bourbon and, these other things about life. He had a garden, and I was able, because of the success they had, we went to his home, and he had this fantastic man cave. And so we got to know these people personally, but that was not the norm. And so it's really refreshing with Gabe and his staff to be able to talk normal stuff with them. And it's a different game, clearly, now with different rules. And they approach the game differently, which I find fascinating. And, anytime I'm able to learn something, I'm excited. And I feel like I learned a lot from Gabe and his staff.
Well, since I have you on the show, one thing I definitely had to ask you was, what's your relationship like with Kruk and Kipe? Like, do you compare them like your cool uncles, or how do you describe it? Because I know you have a special relationship with them.
I do. It's one of my favorite relationships that I've been able to have in my career. I mean, it's hard to actually describe because it's definitely got a family aspect, but a mentor aspect, a big brother or uncle aspect to it. It's a really a mixed bag of how they have treated me over the years, which has been phenomenal. And, I think part of it is I was really lucked out as to getting with this crew at the time I got with them and what the team and the organization accomplished. Part of that is just, luck. But I also think that a lot of it was I worked my ass off, and Dwayne and Mike knew that. And Dwayne and Mike saw the criticism I was under the first few years, not just the Jonathan Sanchez thing. I mean, this was years of kind of taking some abuse, whether it was deserved or not, but me not reacting to it publicly. And I think that said something to them. And, I reacted at home for sure. And, but I didn't take it to work. I didn't take it to them. I didn't complain to them. I didn't ask them to help me with it. I just took it on the chin and was like, I'm going to pay my dues like everybody else. I'm here to do a job that, by the way, there has no job description. I'm figuring this out on the fly with two future Hall of Famers. What can I say that they can't? How do I add to this?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I can add my perspective, my female perspective and point of view of the game. And I'm going to humanize these guys more for people because they're breaking down the game and they're the best at it. So that's not going to be my role, but I can add Brandon Belt is a little tired because they just had a baby and here's a picture and, make them feel more tangible as people. And I think, I don't want to speak for them, but I'm not sure what they would say, but I think that they enjoyed that too, seeing what I was going to come up with for each show, and that it wasn't going to necessarily be, the X's and O's. It was going to be a little outside of the box. And they absolutely knew what I was going through. And one of my favorite stories was just kind of, having my daily dose of punishment on sports talk radio and then getting to the game. And they asked for me to come up to the booth. This was before I felt comfortable enough to go into the booth every night. I mean, by the end of my career, I was in there every night. I would just take my dinner in there and sit in there and, shoot the shit with them. So, but they called me up to the booth and they're like, come on, we're going to go next door. And it was where Willie McCovey sat. I'm like, okay, so we're going out of the booth to another booth. Okay, this is serious. And they just looked at me and said, listen, we know what's going on. And we want you to know that we want you here. And enough said. We've got daughters and sisters and mothers, and we don't like what's happening, but we want you here. So I think I had a role in their lives. I mean, Mike always tells me that I look like his sister, and um, there's a daughter, sister, mother, wife aspect and all of that for people that you work with a lot. I have like a lot of work husbands, right? Because you're with them a lot.
Yeah.
And so they were protective in a way that was going to be helpful. And that night on the broadcast, Dwayne goes, we're going to go down to Amy G and we're happy about it. And that was his way of letting people know she's not going anywhere. We
Yeah.
want her here. And we definitely had bumps in the road throughout the thing. I remember when Buster's ankle was broken and I got the information and I tweeted it out and my daughter just walked into the house and I didn't know it was, I thought everybody had the news at that point and they hadn't. And so I broke it. And Dwayne had like just been on the radio saying we didn't have the information yet because we were supposed to be like on lockdown on hold so that everybody had it right.
Mm.
And I'm like, broken, tibia or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I was at Starbucks getting my coffee. I didn't know. I thought everybody knew. So there were times that I have upset them and, you have to deal with that and it's not fun to be on that side of things, but they always found a way to forgive me. And I found a way to, let them know I was sorry or I've learned from this, this isn't going to happen again. Again, that whole thing, like you can make a mistake, but don't make it twice.
Mm.
So, and they just are two of my favorite people on the planet. I love them. And what you see is what you get. That relationship that they have is priceless and one of my favorite friendships to witness.
Mm. Well, you said in there about working your ass off. I've always been surprised. I always see you're always wearing like kind of nice, dressy kind of shoes. You're not wearing Hokas or anything. You're out there getting your
I
steps
have
in.
Hokas.
Oh,
I
you
have
do?
two.
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what do you wear to get through? I mean, you're in the upper level, then you're in the bleachers, then you're in the club level, so you get around during a game.
Yeah, well, I used to, when I was doing the in-game stuff, we would clock about 5 miles a day.
Wow.
And I had one cameraman, Sammer, who was my cameraman, a work husband for
Yeah.
years. And it became our workout and like, all right, set your watch. And it was so much fun. Like we'd see how many steps we got each game and we try and do more the next game. And most people don't like going to the view reserve or we're like, no, we need more steps. Let's go. Let's find something. And so we hauled it around that park for years. And I will say there were days that some shoes were really good. But I never wore and never will a stiletto of any type. I always had like a block heel or
Mm.
a wedge. Like that's the trick. If you're going to have to really boogie fast, like wear, something with some support. My mom would say that I'm doomed to have horrible feet later on because of the shoes that I wear. But tennies and like high tops are becoming super popular
Mm.
now, dresses for the
Yeah.
feet reporters. And so I'm like, man, I missed that whole era. And so, but I teach at Sonoma State. It's one of my biggest things. My first day of class is what you wear says a lot about the how you want to be thought of. And you only get one chance at a first impression, right? And it's always something I kind of receive some backlash for because I'll say, this what you have on is not acceptable for a speech. And they're like, what? This is what I have. I'm like, you can figure it out. You'll figure it out. And I'm a stickler about appearance.
Mm.
So that's probably why I'm glad that you said that because that supports my teaching
Yeah.
philosophy of, wear what you want to be thought of.
I can get an honorary A for the day, you know?
Yes, you can. It's easy in my class.
Well, we spoke about your book earlier. You wrote Smarty Marty, right? and that was
Yes,
based
Marty's my game. Yeah.
after your mom and grandma, not after Marty Larry, or
No, yeah, I remember him asking me that. He actually asked that, that if it was after Marty. And I love Marty, but no. So my grandmother was Martha.
Mm,
And so the character, it's not really based on my grandmother per se as much as I wanted. So when I wrote the book, she was very ill. And
mm,
she was someone who really encouraged me to take on the project. And so, and it was like right before they were going on a playoff run. And I'm like, I don't know how to, again, here we go. I don't know how to do this, but okay, I'll do it with 110%. But she said, I really think you should write this book. And so I did it. And she passed
mm,
on November 12th, 2012. And I'd written the book. And I knew at that point that I could immortalize her in a sense by naming the book after her, naming the main character after her. The scoring and that, that message in the game that you can teach a kid to love baseball through scoring baseball is very much my mother, because she taught me how to score at all of my brother's little league games. She was the team mom, and my dad was coaching, and I was 4. I've literally grown up on a baseball field. Like I haven't gone far from where I grew up. And so she taught me how to score. But the idea of a girl knowing everything about baseball and teaching a boy how the game works, there's a lot
mm,
of my grandmother in that, and there's a lot of me in that, where you constantly are questioned about your knowledge, and you didn't play at this level. How would you know? And then you look around the press box, and I'm like, how many people played at this level that write about it every day? Yeah.
yeah.
So it's just trying to break through the stereotypes and start getting people to think of a female in the lead role and as the brains, behind the game, because that has nothing to do with physical ability. It's
Mm,
mental ability. And so that's, and there's a little bit of my brother in there with, the sibling relationship, and my son not liking sports. That was something that, we connected with. He did like to score, and because it was something to do during
mm,
the game. And also just trying to bring back what I believe is a true art of baseball is scoring baseball. It creates conversation. It's socializing. What would you score this? What did you see?
mm,
And, with phones and everything now, we've kind of lost that
yeah.
socializing aspect to the game. So that's what the impetus was. My grandmother was, the one who encouraged me to do it, and it's named after her. And so it led to a scorebook that I created for kids or for anyone. I mean, it's what I use. I use my own scorebook.
Mm,
And then a chapter book dealing with a little more gender stereotypes. And because Marty in that book, she becomes the public or the play-by-play announcer.
mm.
And then my next book coming out, Marty's going to manage.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so we keep giving her more and more responsibility. And I think real life is very much paralleling this book. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's, Alyssa Nacken helped me a little bit. I did an interview with her and for this book, and she was kind of my muse to see how far women have come from when I first wrote the original. I honestly would not have guessed I would see a female in
Yeah.
uniform on a Major League Baseball field in 2012 when I wrote the first book. So, it's been a joy to watch the progression.
Well, I think she managed a game in spring training the other day, if I remember right. Um, and I had her on. I said, "Hey, excited to see where you go. Hopefully, you'll be a manager one day." So she said she's learning from the best. So hopefully, it'll happen.
And I think she also said, she absolutely believes that's going to
Mm,
happen,
yeah.
whether it's her or somebody else. I mean, we've got it happening in the minors already.
Mm,
And, it's just, it's a lot of issues in the world are, you've gotten somewhere when you don't have to talk about it
yeah.
anymore. Right.
Exactly.
So the fact that, we're not really talking about me being a reporter and being female anymore, right? Like that was a big deal in 2008. And
Mm,
I was fresh meat for people at that time. Now that's kind of passe. Now we're looking at coaches and are they qualified for this? And I'll never forget the first time I wrote something on Twitter, like I spoke out about something political on Twitter, which I rarely do. And even though I have my beliefs, right? It's not because I'm not active. It's not really the place to do it. But something was so ridiculous that I wrote something. And this guy writes me back and he goes, just stick to sports. And I thought, you know what? There's a lot of advancement in that statement because 20 years ago, he wouldn't have wanted me to talk about sports either.
Yeah.
So we're making a few steps forward.
Yeah, it's like the dumb shut up and sing type thing people like to say, you know. But it
Yeah.
does remind me of you talking about that because I had Renelle on about a year
Oh,
ago. Yeah, and one thing I never thought, I think she was in the news over something. People from other states were saying stuff. And I remember I've grown up going to the stadium, hearing her voice. I never thought that's a female voice. That's the voice, you know. So
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
crazy how other people, that's like a big deal. And it made me realize, oh, I never even thought of that. So like you said, I think we're getting there and hopefully it just
We
keeps
like
happening.
you.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
keep you.
yeah. Well, one thing I just had to squeeze in here, I have a friend named Kate Bowen. She's a teacher, and she just had to let me tell you that she taught her students how to keep score as a class from your book. So I just had to,
Yay.
yeah, had to squeeze
I love
that.
that. A lot of math teachers will use it,
Mm.
just to do like stats and ERAs and stuff like that. So that's one of the best things you could tell me. Thank you.
Yeah. And one fun question I have to squeeze in here, I'll wrap it up. But you've been known to do like Wine Wednesdays on Instagram. You have a new guest, a lot of former Giants type people. What is your wine of choice? I gotta know.
I'm a Pinot Noir girl. That
Okay.
would be go-to. Love it. And I have Campos Family Vineyards
Mm.
that I work with and I'm partnering with. So hopefully people can go buy their wine. And I also sell Scout and Cellar wine, which is
Okay.
clean crafted wine. So I'm a consultant for them. That happened during the pandemic. But I also am never going to turn down a glass of wine ever, ever.
Well, maybe you'll have some tonight, right? When you're catching up with your soccer friends.
Tonight might be a Manhattan night. We might go
Okay.
bourbon tonight. Yeah. I mean, we've been friends for a long time. We played soccer together for a long time. They're a fun group. So we'll see. I'm not sure what I'm in the mood for.
Yeah. Well, Amy, I gotta say it's been quite a great experience to have you on the show. It was really nice to look over in the dugout there today and meet you, and now to have you on the show less than a week later is pretty special to me. So thanks for coming on, and it was fun getting to know you, and I hope to see you around the ballpark some more.
My pleasure. I'm glad you came up and said hi. See what can happen?
Yeah, see?
Thanks, Jim.